Please welcome, from Florida, my friend, the human biologist, Gary Brecka.
Amazing, dude. And just as an adjunct, Eric, it's the #1 podcast in the world, the health and wellness podcast in the world. Love the story about Richard Branson. I had a chance to actually spend some time on Richard Branson's island, and I echo exactly what you're saying. I remember that I was there for a few days, and he said, if you want to set a meeting with me, there's 3 ways to have a meeting with me. We can meet over kite surfing, we can meet over cycling around the island, or we can meet over a 90-minute walk. And I chose the 90-minute walk and walked the island with him for 90 minutes, but I totally agree. He spends 4 or 5 hours a day just moving his body. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Gary Brecka. I'm a human biologist, a researcher. For 22 years, I was a mortality researcher for big life insurance. And what this meant was that the mortality team that I was on was charged with predicting life expectancy to the month. So if we got 10 years of medical records on you and 10 years of demographic data, we could tell the insurance company how long you had to live to the month. And I get a lot of flack about that, especially when I get online or I get on a podcast. I get a lot of flack about that. People say, well, if you could predict mortality to the month, you would have won a Nobel Prize. But the truth is, this is some of the most accurate science in the world. No other financial services company, no other financial services enterprise on the planet takes the level of risk that a life insurance company or annuity company does based on how many more months you have left on Earth. And if you want to know how accurate they are, just look at what happened during the 2008, 2009 financial services crisis. We had 364 banks fail. We didn't have a single life insurance company fail. It is some of the most accurate science in the world because life insurance companies have data that no other financial services enterprise, no other medical enterprise, not even the federal government has. And that is that they know the day, the date, the time, the location, and the cause of death for 370 million lives. And I used to say that if the database that I had access to during that career could ever see the light of day, it would upend modern medicine in a way that would be catastrophic, absolutely catastrophic, because the data speaks for itself. We knew that opioids have addictive properties 10 years before anybody was onto the opioid crisis. We know the trajectory of every pharmaceutical compound and its impact on hormone levels, on accelerating mortality. We know the impact of statins. We know the impact of cardiovascular medication. We know the impact of mental health medication, things like Adderall, Vyvanse, and Ritalin, and all sorts of other chemicals and synthetics and pharmaceuticals that we put into our body to solve one issue that actually have a negative outcome on the other side and have a negative impact on longevity. And so I was in this career for 22 years, just predicting death. And one of the sad things about being in that career was that I was not allowed to have any contact with the patient. I was not allowed to have any contact with the treating physician. Even if I saw a life-threatening drug interaction, I could not contact the patient. I couldn't even contact the treating physician to warn them. I just had to watch it happen. And I learned 2 things in this 22-year career. Number one, I really began to have this massive moral divide in how I was making a living. And I realized as time went on that this was not just data, that there was human beings on the other side of these spreadsheets. This was somebody's mother, somebody's father, somebody's sister, somebody's child. And I realized that the main reason why people are not living longer, healthier, happier lives was not because of the lack of pharmaceuticals, a lack of chemicals, a lack of synthetics. The reason why most people are not living a longer, healthier, happy life is because of what we call modifiable risk factors. And I started to manipulate my mortality model. And I would go into certain nutrient deficiencies that people had, and I would artificially correct a nutrient deficiency in their blood, for example, a vitamin D3 deficiency. And I would correct that deficiency and I would watch the life expectancy jump. I would see mild anemia in the blood work and I would artificially correct it and I would watch the life expectancy jump. And so after doing this for several years, I finally decided that I was not going to spend one more minute of my life predicting how long people were going to live. and when they were going to die. And I was going to spend the balance of my lifetime helping people live healthier, happier, longer, more fulfilling lives. And so that's my purpose with you today, is that I know that this information needs to make its way to humanity, because I believe that if we build an army of like-minded people that are informed, that can go out and inspire people to make a change, then we can actually begin to transform lives, and we can take healthcare back under our own control. We can become citizen scientists for ourselves, and we can find the missing raw material in the human body. We can put that raw material back, and we can watch it thrive. And I make two bold promises every single time that I take a stage, or I sit on a podcast, or I host a podcast, or I do an interview or stage talk, or anytime that I get a chance to speak to anyone. I make two bold promises. Number one, if you do what I'm going to discuss over the next 40 minutes and you put this practice into your life, I will add, or it will add, 7 years to the lifespan of everybody in this room, everybody that is listening to the simulcast. And number two, before we're off this Zoom call, I will take any ailment that you or a loved one suffers from. I'm going to leave about 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. I will take any ailment that you or a loved one suffers from: ADD, ADHD, OCD, manic depression, bipolar, autoimmune conditions, rheumatoid arthritis, any ailment that you suffer from, and I will tell you exactly what raw material is missing from that person's body that is causing that condition to exist. You see, we've been fed a lot of misinformation over the last few decades. And I don't want to get into a whole conspiracy theory, but I remember I spoke to a very large room full of board certified physicians, as far to the back of the room as I could see. And I asked this room full of board certified physicians, I said, by show of hands, how many of you right now are treating patients for genetically inherited disease? Genetically inherited diseases, things that run in families like hypertension, hypothyroid, drug and alcohol addiction, depression and anxiety, hypercholesterolemia, hypertriglyceridemia, all of these conditions that we've been told, because they run in families, are genetically inherited conditions. Do you know that without a single exception, every single physician's hand in that room was up? And I said, well, keep your hands up for a second, because understand, if you're treating patients for genetically inherited disease, we have mapped the entire human genome. We know every gene in the human body. Can any of you tell me what gene causes any of those diseases? And every single hand in the room went down. And I said, the reason why you can't tell me what gene causes any of those diseases is because that gene does not exist. And if that gene does not exist, that means that those diseases do not exist. You see, what happens in human beings is we put all kinds of raw materials into our bodies: vitamins, minerals, amino acids, nutrients of all kind. Not a single compound that enters the human body, not one, is used in the form that we put it in. Without a single exception, what the body does is it takes that raw material, that nutrient, that vitamin, that mineral, that amino acid, and it converts it into the usable form. If your body cannot make this conversion, you have a deficiency. And it is this deficiency that leads to some of the most common ailments that plague mankind. Everything from weight gain and water retention to autoimmune conditions to gut issues to poor focus and concentration. We don't have a mental health issue, and I mean a mental health crisis in this country. We have a lack of mental fitness. And so my mission is to get the message out that there are simple raw materials that you can put back into the human body that will cause it to thrive in ways we never thought possible. God put us on this planet to have it all. We were meant to thrive. And most people are walking around right now at about 60% of their true state of normal. And I'm going to prove that to you over the next few minutes. And I'm going to tell you exactly what we can do to put these raw materials back into their bodies so they can thrive in ways we never thought possible. And I want you to think about your questions about what are you facing, or what is someone that you love facing right now that they're struggling with, that we could go into their body and replace a raw material and watch that condition eviscerate. So are you guys ready to go on this journey with me? I can't hear you, so I assume it's yes. Can we go to the next slide? This is just a sample of a life expectancy report that we used to do. This is, again, some of the most accurate science in the world. We had a better than 93% accuracy rate in predicting mortality. It is astounding what happens to human beings when their bodies are missing certain raw materials, and you can predict the progression of the disease. Can you go to the next slide? So this is another saying that I say every single time that I get a chance to engage with an audience. I think this is the most important statement, maybe the most important sentence that you will hear for the rest of your lifetime in terms of its impact on how many more years you have left on Earth, your waking energy, your sleep, your hormone levels, your water retention, your weight gain, your response to exercise, the depth of your delta wave of sleep, your cognitive function, your short-term recall, and that is that the presence of oxygen is the absence of disease. Nothing is more true than that statement. And we're going to talk about how do we get more oxygen into the body? How do we better utilize oxygen in the body? What can we do to carry more oxygen in our blood? What are some of the supplements and nutrients we can put into our body so we have healthy red blood cells full of hemoglobin that transport healthy amounts of oxygen? And we're going to talk about how do we raise the oxidative state in the body by 35 or 40% over the next few weeks by using simple raw materials to help our bone marrow produce healthy red blood cells that carry and transport oxygen well. And again, the presence of oxygen really truly is the absence of disease. Can we go to the next slide? I made my bold promise already. I make this every time I take the stage that if you do what I'm going to ask you to do, we're going to add 7 years to the lifespan of everybody in this room. And that secondly, we will take any ailment that you or a loved one suffers from, and I will tell you exactly what raw material is missing from their body that is causing that condition to exist. And for those of you that are in the supplement space or the keto space or the nutrition space, bravo for you, because it's going to take an army of people to take healthcare back. Human beings are not as sick or diseased as we think we are. We are nutrient deficient. You know, I remember when I was in grad school getting my second human biology degree, I had to take all these plant botany courses, which I actually really hated, but you have to take them. And I was in school getting a graduate degree in human biology, and I had to take these plant classes. But what I remember most of all from studying plants was that anytime there was something wrong in the leaf or the trunk or the branches of a tree, if you called a true arborist, a true botanist out to your house, they wouldn't actually touch the leaves of the tree. The first thing they would do is they would core test the soil. And they would say, you know what, there's no nitrogen in the soil. And they would add nitrogen to the soil and the leaf would heal. But, you know, we've stopped thinking about human beings this way. We think that we need chemicals and synthetics and pharmaceuticals. We think that if somebody has high blood pressure, they're missing a beta blocker. Or if they have ADHD, they're missing Adderall and amphetamine. Or if they have high cholesterol, they're missing a statin to keep that cholesterol under control. And none of that is true. When you give the human body the raw material it needs to do its job, magic things happen in human beings. And I'll prove this to you because I know that we have a room full of hard-charging entrepreneurs, and I would love to be able to, I think I can see the audience, to say by show of hands, how many of you either know somebody or are currently suffering from ADD or ADHD? Oh, I see a lot of hands up there. So let's just take that one for example. Attention deficit disorder or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is not an attention deficit at all. It's an attention overload disorder. It is too many windows open at the same time. And why does this happen? Because when the body gets deficient in very specific B vitamins, the complex of B vitamins, and a very specific nutrient called methylfolate, you may want to write that down. Methylfolate is the converted form of folic acid. So when our body gets deficient in something called methylfolate, it has a very difficult time breaking down neurotransmitters. Remember, in the human beings, we don't just create thought, we also dismantle thought. We actually break thought down. And if we're not able to break thought down at the rate that we create thought, then the mind gets very clouded. You see, people with ADD or ADHD do not lack the ability to pay attention. They lack the ability to pay attention to so many things. And so how do we correct that? We put the methylated nutrients back into the human body that are grossly missing from our diet because our soil is so depleted, because it's so full of glyphosates, it's so full of pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, on all kinds of preservatives. We put the methylfolate back into the body so that it can properly start to degrade neurotransmitters. And this is when magic things happen. You see, in 1993, the US federal government signed a deal with Big Pharma to spray our entire grain supply in the United States with folic acid. And for the record, folic acid, contrary to popular belief, is not a natural vitamin. You cannot find folic acid anywhere on the surface of the earth. Folic acid does not occur naturally in nature. We make it in a laboratory. And you will never convince me that something that is man-made in a laboratory is a nutrient that is essential to optimal health. And so what happened when we started spraying all grains, all white flour, all white rice, all white bread, and every kind of cereal produced in the United States with this chemical folic acid? By the way, we don't call it sprayed with folic acid. We call it fortified or enriched. When you spin around a box of crackers or something that contains white flour, white rice, white bread, white pasta, and you look at the back of that label and it says fortified or enriched, that means it's been sprayed with the chemical folic acid. And what happens when we put this chemical into our bodies? Well, 44% of the world's population has a gene mutation called MTHFR. I'm not going to tell you what the nickname is for that gene mutation. You write it down, figure it out for yourself. But they have this gene mutation that does not allow them to make this conversion. And so what happens? Well, now I have the presence of something my body can't process and a deficiency in a nutrient that my body desperately needs to degrade neurotransmitters. And what happens? Hyperactivity, hyperexcitation. If you have a child that eats breakfast in the morning and then it's a full contact sport to get that kid in the car to go to school in the morning, and then you get the calls coming home from the school saying little Johnny can't pay attention, he's disruptive, he doesn't follow his instructions, he doesn't complete assignments, you need to strip the folic acid out of that child's body, add something called methylfolate to their diet, or add a supplement with methylfolate in it. If you guys are part of a company that is producing methylated vitamins, bravo for you. And watch what happens to that child's behavior over the next 7 days. The same is true in adults. You know, a massive issue that we have in the United States is more than 62% of Americans report that they suffer on a regular basis from anxiety. How many of you actually either suffer from anxiety or know somebody that is suffering from anxiety? Like, look at the number of hands that are up in the room right here. Well, what is anxiety? Like, when I know it's a fear of the future, it's the sensation of the presence of a fear without the actual presence of a fear. But what causes it? Why does our body feel anxious? Why can we feel fear without the presence of a fear? Well, if we go through a little bit of human physiology for a second and we understand that as sophisticated as we'd like to think our brains are, it's really not. The brain is very primal. You know what the brain cares about? The brain cares about survival. And by the way, the brain is very nasty. The brain is like the little Kim Jong-un of dictators. It sits up here and it literally takes everything for itself. If it wants calcium, it'll leach it from the bones. If it wants amino acids, it'll strip it from lean muscle. What the brain wants, the brain gets. If it wants sugar, it will activate a receptor on the back of the tongue called the RF1A2 receptor, and it will give you a dopamine reward for giving it sugar. This is why most people don't like sugar. They are addicted to sugar. They are addicted to the endorphin dopamine reward that they get from eating sugar. This is also why if you chemically broke down most artificial sweeteners, you'd see that only 12% of the chemical is designed to taste sweet. The other 88% of the chemical is designed to bang the dopamine receptor so that you get addicted to that artificial sweetener. There are entire labs, I'm not exaggerating, all over the world, full of PhDs researching these receptors on the tongue that connect to dopamine receptors in the brain so they can hammer these receptors so that you get addicted to certain foods. This is by design, not by accident. So those of you that are suffering from ADD or ADHD, suffering from anxiety, or you know somebody that's suffering from anxiety, I want you to ask them these three questions. And we are going to prove at the end of these three questions that this is a nutrient deficiency and it is not coming from their outside environment. It is coming from their physiology. So the first question you ask them is, have you had anxiety on and off throughout your entire lifetime? They're going to say yes. The second question you ask them is, can you point to the specific trigger that causes it all the time? And they're going to tell you no. Sometimes I can just be sitting, at dinner with my family. I can be driving home from work on an otherwise innocuous day, and I can be overwhelmed with anxiety. Well, how does that happen? Because anxiety, and by the way, the third question is, if you've ever tried anti-anxiety medications, did they work? They're going to say, no, they just made me feel like a zombie, right? You can tranquilize somebody into submission, but it doesn't remove that feeling of anxiety. So what truly is anxiety? It is a rise in the brain of a category of neurotransmitters called catecholamines. Catecholamines is a class of neurotransmitters that cause a fight or flight response. These are epinephrine, norepinephrine, ephedrine, and adrenaline, which we also call adrenaline, and dopamine. So what happens when these begin to rise? So for example, let's just say that you drove home tonight and you got out of your car and somebody was standing in front of you with a knife. A very real fear. You would actually flood the brain with catecholamines. Your pupils would dilate. Your heart rate would increase. Your extremities would flood with blood. You would begin to have a fight or flight response. But you could be laying, I'm on the 30th floor of a condo right now. You could be laying on the 30th floor in bed on the 30th floor of a condo, and you could start thinking about getting eaten by a shark. And the chances of a shark getting out of that ocean and coming up that elevator are zero, but you can have the exact same response. So how is it that my body can experience fear and react to fear that's not even present? It's entirely imagined. This is the genesis of anxiety. And so what happens is in the human mind, we don't just create thought, as I explained, we also dismantle thought. We don't just enter a mood, we dismantle moods. So as catecholamines rise in the brain, we get the sensation of fear without the presence of a fear. Methylfolate, the complex of B vitamins, an amino acid called trimethylglycine, and an amino acid called SAMe, S-adenosyl methionine. These are the deficiencies that make it very difficult for people to dismantle catecholamines. And as they rise, they feel anxious and they enter the motion of anxiety. You see, when the body is able to degrade catecholamines, we feel very balanced. We have our mood is normalized. This is the same thing in depression. We define depression, ironically, in the United States, we define depression as an inadequate supply of serotonin. So according to modern medicine, if you are low on serotonin, you are by definition depressed. Well, wouldn't you think if the definition of depression is low serotonin, that the fix would be to raise serotonin? Well, that's not what we do. We take people that are low on serotonin and we put them on something called an SSRI, a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. And what this does is it rations what little serotonin you have. So by definition, it never raises serotonin. So by definition, it never ends depression. You see, if I can get you to subscribe to the fact that you have a disease, I can get you to subscribe to a lifetime of medication. And so what happens is, why does serotonin get low? Well, first of all, 90% of the serotonin in your body is right here. It is made in the gut. It is made through the process of methylation, and it requires methylfolate. It requires a B vitamin called methylcobalamin, not the cyanide-based form of B12, cyanocobalamin, but it requires a light metal called methylcobalamin in order to actually methylate these neurotransmitters. We take an amino acid called tryptophan and we methylate it into the neurotransmitter serotonin, and then it goes up into our brain and creates a mood. Well, if you don't have it here, you can't have it here. This is why depression rarely begins in the outside environment. It almost always begins in your physiology. If you saw the trajectory of what happened with Dana White and some of the other clients that I've worked with that are very public in the domain that were suffering for decades with high blood pressure, we started to dig into what nutrient deficiencies were gone from their body. Do you know that 85% of all hypertensive diagnoses, meaning diagnosis of high blood pressure, are what we call idiopathic, meaning they're of unknown origin? So 85% of all people diagnosed with high blood pressure, the physician that's diagnosing it has no idea what's causing it. In fact, most people with high blood pressure have a normal EKG. They have a normal EEG. They have normal heart and lung sounds. If they've ever had one, they have a normal cardiac catheterization. They have normal dye contrast studies. So why is their blood pressure up? And why, if we can't find anything wrong with the heart, do we medicate the heart? Why do we accuse an organ of a crime that it's not committing? Well, if we look at what happens outside of the heart, all human beings have an amino acid in our bloodstream. It's called homocysteine. You may want to write this one down too if you or a loved one suffers from high blood pressure. It's called homocysteine, Homocysteine, homocysteine. Everybody that's listening to this right now has this in their blood. But if you have a deficiency in certain nutrients, your body does not break homocysteine down. And this amino acid rises in the blood. What happens when this amino acid rises in the blood? Well, as it's cruising by the inside lining of the artery, it irritates the artery. And when you irritate an artery, do you know what it does? It clamps down. And if you make the pipes smaller in a fixed system, pressure goes up. And the pressure doesn't rise because there's something wrong with the heart. And yet we still stand on the heart with beta blockers and calcium channel blockers and diuretics, which is why people's blood pressure never gets better. It just gets more medicated because there's nothing wrong with the heart in many cases. It is the vascular system clamping down. You have 63,000 miles of blood vessel in your body, 63,000 miles. It does not take much arterial narrowing to drive pressure up. And if you watched what happened to Dana White or some of these other clients, we put them on a simple amino acid called TMG, trimethylglycine. You can get it at GNC. Many of you that are in the supplement space, your companies might produce this amino acid. And you can take this amino acid, you can lower homocysteine, you can return the vascular laxity to the arterial system, that and something called resveratrol. And if you took resveratrol and trimethylglycine and watched your homocysteine drop and watched the vascular system relax, you would see pressure very often and return to normal. And I could just keep going and going and going, and we could go through all of these different ailments that society faces. And so many of us are just accepting things as a consequence of aging. Oh, I've got weight gain. I've got water retention. I got hormone imbalance. I got poor focus and concentration. I've got a little bit of ADD, a little bit of ADHD. You know, my waking energy is not the same. My response to exercise is not what it was. And we just accept these as a consequence of aging, and they are not a consequence of aging at all. They are a consequence of missing raw material in the human body. And that is my mission, is to try to go into human beings and find the missing raw material and replace it so that we can thrive in ways we never thought possible. Can we go to the next slide? This is just a little bit about my morning routine. People ask me all the time, what do you do in the morning? By the way, none of this will cost you a dime. This will cost you zero. The majority of the room will not take this advice and put it to practice, because aging is the aggressive pursuit of comfort. And we pursue comfort more aggressively than we pursue a state of optimal health. We have to stop thinking about stress in the body as being negative. The body has a response mechanism called hormesis. When it's stressed, it strengthens. Do you know if you don't tear a muscle, it won't grow? If you don't load a bone, it will not strengthen. And if you don't challenge the immune system, it will weaken. We are seeing, coming out of the pandemic, the consequences of a globally weakened immune system. And I'm not trying to make a political statement. I get a lot of feathers ruffled when I say this, but the worst thing that ever happened to humanity was residential quarantining, masking, and social distancing. Taking human beings out of contact with other human beings when we are meant, God gave us an immune system for a reason. When we shut that immune system down and came out of the pandemic, what is happening now? All kinds of nonsense. Monkeypox. Anybody heard of monkeypox before the pandemic? I never heard of monkeypox. We're on our 8th iteration of Omicron, meaning the 8th mutation of a COVID variant. We're on our 7th booster right now. And by the way, well, I won't go down that road. I'll probably split the audience in half. But I did an entire talk a few months ago on long COVID and vaccine injury. And let me tell you, those two names are superimposable. There is no difference between long COVID and vaccine injury. And if you want to talk about how we can get the spike protein out of the bloodstream, I'll tell you exactly how we do that with nanokinase and bromelain and thymulin. And we can get the consequences of these messenger RNA experiments out of our bloodstream and restore our vascular system back to a state where it can naturally exchange with its outside environment. You know, when you take a synthetic message, and when you take a message that our DNA normally sends into the cell, an instruction called messenger RNA, and you create a synthetic copy of that, without understanding that messenger RNA in a cell lasts 2 hours and synthetic messenger RNA lasts forever, then you don't understand what chemical messaging can do to a human being. And so anytime that we start to toil with Mother Nature, we get the consequences of that down the road, which is why you see, and during my career, I saw so many revolutionary drugs then get pulled from the shelves 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road when the real research came out on the damages and the long-term consequences, when most people were actually just suffering from nutrient deficiencies. You know that 85% of dark-complected Latinos, African Americans, Indians, Middle Eastern, dark-complected populations are clinically deficient in vitamin D3, the single most important compound in the human body. 50% of the world's population is clinically deficient in this nutrient. And what happens when we get deficient in vitamin D3? Well, first of all, it's the only vitamin that a human being can make on our own. So there's hundreds of vitamins in your bloodstream right now. You're only capable of making one, and it's vitamin D3. So just think for a second how important that must be to human function. Every single cell in your body has a receptor site for this nutrient. The truth is, most of us are not getting enough sun. It's not that we're getting too much. We're not getting enough sun. We are photovoltaic beings. When we get into the sun, we take cholesterol and sunlight and we make this amazing compound called vitamin D3. If you're not supplementing with vitamin D3, you should be 5,000 IUs a day with 80 micrograms of K2. Because what happens when you start to deplete vitamin D3? You know, I'll tell you, in my career, I saw thousands and thousands of times people with a clinical deficiency in vitamin D3 will eventually present with rheumatoid arthritis-like symptoms. Now, I'm not saying you have rheumatoid arthritis. I'm saying the symptoms between D3 deficiency and rheumatoid are parallel. So what happens? You wake up sore and achy in the morning, like you had a workout the night before when you haven't. The soles of your feet are tender when you get out of bed to walk to the bathroom and take your first piss in the morning. Or, I didn't mean to say pee. Piss. I meant to say urinate for the first time. So you go to the bathroom and to urinate, the soles of your feet and your ankles are sore. And then it moves to your knees and your hips and your low back. And pretty soon, like, it actually hurts to make a really tight fist. You walk into the wrong physician's office and give them that sequence of symptoms, they're going to say, you know what? You've got rheumatoid arthritis. Good news is I'm going to hit you with some high-dose prednisone, and then I'm going to put you on something called a corticosteroid. And you're just going to take this corticosteroid for the rest of your life, and you're not going to feel the pain from this. Now, remember, this is a deficiency in vitamin D3. You've now been diagnosed with a condition that you do not have. And if you don't think that this is occurring, you need to look at the 2016 Harvard University study that determined that modern medicine, medical error, misdiagnosis is the third leading cause of death. Only cancer and cardiovascular disease kill more people than modern medicine. And that is a fact. That study, by the way, was repeated in 2019 by Johns Hopkins, and the study got worse. So they didn't publish the Hopkins study, they published the Harvard study. And it said that medical error was the third leading cause of death. And I would see this come across my desk all the time. I would just want to pick up the phone and tell this lady, oh my God, just take vitamin D3, get off of the steroid. Because we knew in the mortality space that if you started corticosteroids, you had exactly 6 years and 1 day until you were having a joint replacement. It was that accurate. It was so accurate that if you were a 60-year-old female and I saw that you were misdiagnosed with rheumatoid and you were put on a corticosteroid, I would artificially advance your age 6 years and 1 day, and I would schedule the joint replacement for you. And then as soon as I scheduled the joint replacement, I would begin to reduce what's called your ambulatory profile, how much you move and ambulate, how well you're moving around. You know that sitting is the new smoking. Sedentary lifestyle is now the leading cause of all-cause mortality. So as I reduced your mobility, I would bring in all of the diseases that exacerbate with reduced mobility. And all of a sudden, you were succumbing to a disease that you never would have had because you had a surgery that was not required, because you were diagnosed with a condition you did not have and put on a pharmaceutical chemical that you didn't need because you had a nutrient deficiency. And I can give you thousands, literally, of examples like this. And this is why we need to be citizen scientists and take healthcare back into our own hands, right? I mean, I'm not anti-modern medicine. Look, if I get in a car accident or I have chest pain, I'm going to the ER. And I want everything they have to offer. I want painkillers. I want a surgeon. I want someone stitching up my wounds. But putting the condition of humanity's state of optimal health into the hands of modern medicine is a mistake that we have learned from. And we need to take that mistake back, and we need to educate ourselves so that we can go out and inspire other people to make a transformation in their life. And so some simple things that I do, as I travel the world, and I meet with some of the best anti-aging experts, the lead PhDs and MDs and researchers in the field of anti-aging and longevity and optimization. What's fascinating to me is that all of this science is just getting back to the basics: sunlight, grounding, breath work, exposing our body to cold temperatures, supplementing for deficiency, not just the sake of supplementing, and eating whole foods, not whether or not you're vegan or vegetarian or paleo or keto, eating whole, real foods, because it is not the food in most cases, it is the distance from the food to the table that harms us. So when people ask what I do in the mornings, this is what I do in the mornings. We get three things from Mother Nature. Let's not forget. Okay. There are three things that we get from Mother Nature. We get magnetism from the earth, we get oxygen from the air, and we get light from the sun. The less of those three things we get, the more sick we become. We were meant to spend 85% of our time outdoors. Now the average human spends 97% of their time indoors. We control our air temperature, we control our water temperature, we control our environment, we control our light, we control our darkness. We go from a covered house to a covered garage to a covered car to a covered office to a covered mall and right back. And so in the mornings, what I do, and this won't cost you a single cent, is I get outside and I come in contact with the surface of the earth. This is called grounding or earthing. And if you poo-poo this concept, you haven't really researched earthing or grounding. Human beings build up a charge, and we can actually discharge into the earth. Yes, as soon as we contact the surface of the earth, and I'm talking about dirt, grass, sand, we actually discharge into the surface of the earth. And what does that do? It changes the polarity on the surface of our cells so that they're no longer attracted to each other. When they get in proximity to each other, they repel. And you see these microscopes behind me right here? I do this for clients all the time. I take their finger, I prick their finger, I put a drop of their blood on that slide, and I let them see their red blood cells, how clumped together and stuck together they are. And then I take them outside and I just have them spend 6 minutes touching the surface of the earth, or I lay them on something called a PEMF mat, pulse electromagnetic field mat. And then I prick their finger again and I put it on the slide and I let them see how all of their red blood cells are free floating and cannot come in contact with each other. And you free up all that surface area to exchange with the outside environment so that cell can eliminate waste, repair, detoxify, and regenerate. And this is part of the essence of health. And then I expose my skin to sunlight. And I try to get as much skin as I can exposed to sunlight. I try to do this at what's called first light, because the first 45 minutes of the day, God gives us a very, very special type of light. There's no UVA, there's no UVB rays in this light. Natural healing rays of blue rays from the sun. It generates vitamin D3, resets our cortisol receptors, it resets our melatonin receptors. And I do 3 rounds of 30 breaths of obnoxiously deep breath work with a breath hold in between. If you want to see the exact routine, I have a website called theultimatehuman.com. You can actually go there. I have all kinds of tutorial videos on breath work. It will add 0 to your budget and it will add years to your life. Learning how to breathe, how to expose our skin to sunlight, and how to get grounded again. And then I have a cold plunge. I get into a cold plunge, but if you don't have a cold plunge or it's not in the budget, just take a cold shower. Most of us aren't even willing to take a cold shower because it's too uncomfortable, but a minute to 3 minutes in cold water will not only activate brown fat and improve your mood, elevate your emotional state, dump endorphins into your system. It will cause your liver to release something called a cold shock protein, which will scour your blood of free radical oxidation. It will increase the rate of protein synthesis, muscle repair, and it is free. And you have access to this every single day. Putting yourself in that uncomfortable position for 1 to 3 minutes can be one of the most liberating things that you do. And then I supplement for deficiency. Those of you that are in the supplement space, bravo. As long as your nutrients are methylated, you have the methyl form of these nutrients, you are having a massive impact on humanity. Can we go to the next slide? We have something called the superhuman protocol. I talk about this all the time. A superhuman protocol is a PMF mat, an oxygen bag, and a red light therapy bed. That will cost you about $150,000. You don't need to spend $150,000. God gives this to us every single day. Sunlight, grounding, and breath work. You can save $150,000 by exposing your skin to sunlight, learning to do 8 minutes of breath work in the morning, Wim Hof style of breath work in the morning, touching the surface of the earth and taking a cold shower. It will entirely change the trajectory of your life. You'll ignite this hormetic response inside of your body. In fact, would you guys like to do a quick little round of breath work right now? Can we do that? How many people are in the room? 400 people? All right, let's do one round of breath work. Let's make everybody outside the room think this is a giant cult. All right. All right. So what we're going to do, let's just sit comfortably. Put your hands on your lap. And what I want you to do, we're going to do 5 deep breaths with a breath hold. And then we're going to do another 5 deep breaths with a breath hold. So it looks like this. We're going to take an obnoxiously deep breath in. And when I mean obnoxious, I mean like you've been underwater for 2 minutes and you just broke the surface of the earth. The surface of the water, and you never thought you were going to get another breath, right? I want to get air down into the lobes of the lungs. I want to use the diaphragm to massage the intestines. I want to engage all the auxiliary muscles of respiration, the intercostal. So it's going to look like this, and then we'll do it together. You're going to take an obnoxiously deep breath like this, and then you're going to let it out. Don't continue to breathe out. Just let it out until you relax. We're going to do that 5 times. On the 5th breath, we're going to exhale, and we're going to hold our breath for 30 seconds. If you get lightheaded, this is a good sign. If your fingers and toes get tingly, this is a great sign that the oxygen tension is changing in the tissue. The major vasodilator in the human body is not nitric oxide. It is carbon dioxide. By raising our carbon dioxide level, we will dilate our blood vessels, and then we're going to take an obnoxiously deep breath in. We're going to hold that for 10 seconds. We're going to let it out, and we're going to repeat it. Okay, you guys ready? All right, so let's do 5 obnoxious breaths. Ready? Just close your eyes, and we're going to try to sit here for 30 seconds. If you got lightheaded, you had a very high level of carbon dioxide in your blood. All right, we're going to take a deep breath in. Ready? We're going to hold this for 10 seconds. And we're going to let it out. Okay. And we're going to do one more round of 5 deep breaths, followed by a breath hold and an obnoxious inhale. All right, ready? Here we go. We're going to try to sit here for 30 seconds. And we're going to take an obnoxiously deep breath in. Ready? I'm going to hold this for 10 seconds. And we're going to let it out. What I want you, wow, I feel great. How many of you guys feel better now? It is amazing what oxygen does for the human body. You know, have you ever seen somebody that cannot maintain an elevated emotional state? You ever wonder why some people just walk around kind of happy all the time, and some people only access happiness, elation, passion, joy, and arousal for short periods of time? Well, let me tell you something about human physiology. You see, if you were to ask me, Gary, what is a mood? What is an emotional state? I would tell you that it is a collection of neurotransmitters bound to oxygen. You see, the difference between elevated emotional states and suppressed emotional states is the presence of oxygen. Do you know that the difference between anger and passion is one neurotransmitter and the presence of oxygen? Do you know that every elevated emotional state that a human being can experience passion, elation, joy, arousal, libido, all the hell yeah, I won the lottery emotions, they all have oxygen as a part of their molecular structure. You cannot experience them without oxygen. Can you experience anger? Yes. The reason why no human being has ever woken up laughing is because we don't have the oxidative state to experience laughter. But can you wake up angry? Yes. You want to do a fun little experiment tonight? Wait until your spouse is deep, deep asleep and give them a nice deep pinch. Like just grab some skin and give them a good pinch and watch them wake up angry. Instantly, we readily access these lower states of emotion. Anger, despair, jealousy, resentment. These are easy emotional states for us to access. Passion, elation, joy, arousal. These require physiology to get there. And a lot of people search for that emotional state and they wake up in gratitude and they read the right books and they go to the right seminars and they try to get in the right rooms and they try to change their emotional state without changing their physiology. And it fails over and over and over again. Your physiology will drag you down into the state where it most comfortably exists. So can we go to the next slide? So I'm going to try to, I don't know how much time I have left. I lost the timer. So if I start going over my time, just, do the old fish hook and yank me off the stage. So I want to talk a little bit about the physiology of the brain, because I want to kind of bring all of this together and tell you what this means to us as we're trying to go out and build a career. Can we go to the next slide? MIT did an amazing study a few years ago. They published a study in 2016. It was on the neurophysiology of the brain. And what they found, and there are no exceptions to this, is that there is a center in the brain called the amygdala. And the amygdala is a very special area of the brain. It's about the size of two acorns, about the size of two almonds. And in this area of the brain, we experience all of our emotions. So if you're excited, you're excited in the amygdala. If you're angry, you're angry in the amygdala. If you're aroused in the amygdala. So this is the emotional center of the brain. Can we go to the next slide? The interesting thing about the amygdala is that it is the sole gateway to the hippocampus. And the hippocampus is where our memory is stored. There is only one way for a human being to access their memory, and it is through their current emotional state. Now, once you reach the amygdala and you access the memory, can we go to the next slide? Our conscience, our prefrontal cortex, pulls from the hippocampus. It pulls information from our memory and puts it into our conscience, and our conscience is our future. So this means that if the amygdala is the sole gateway to the hippocampus and the hippocampus is the gateway to the prefrontal cortex, this means that our current emotional state determines our future. That is a neurophysiologic fact. If we don't learn to control our emotional state, we will never control our future. Never. So all the self-help motivational books in the world, all the being in the right rooms is not going to help. All of the reading and waking in gratitude will not help you. You have to learn to control your emotional state. And what do we need to have a balanced emotional state? Can we go to the next slide? We need the right nutrients. Human beings need 90 essential minerals, which you can get from Celtic sea salt. You can get from Baja sea salt. I would prefer that you not get it from pink Himalayan sea salt, because most of that comes from China and is laden with heavy metals. If you want to see a really interesting video, go to theultimatehuman.com and look at my sea salt video where I crush pink Himalayan sea salt from 3 manufacturers onto a cutting board and then pass a high-powered magnet over it and watch the salt jump up onto the magnet. So my preference would be Baja or Celtic salt. But we need 90 essential minerals. We need 3 essential fatty acids. Essential means they are essential for life. And we need 9 essential amino acids, 9 proteins. For the record, there is no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. Just let that sink in for a second. There is no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. They are not necessary for life. So you choose your carbohydrates wisely. So if we have the right amino acids, we have the right nutrients, we have the right minerals, the brain begins to function in the healthiest possible way. That's why I want to create an army of people that are putting the right nutrients back into human beings so we can fix the mental health crisis, or, the mental disease crisis that we say that we have, because we actually have a lack of mental fitness, not the presence of mental illness. You get illness from the lack of fitness. You start to drain nutrients out of human beings. You get the expression of disease. And so can we go to the next slide? So I want to give you an exercise. Oh, that's theultimatehuman.com. You can go there. I have a free newsletter if you want to sign up for a free newsletter. I also put all kinds of videos on there about optimal health, anti-aging, longevity. If you want to look at the supplements that correlate to a lot of these conditions, I have those on The Ultimate Human. But what I want to end by kind of tying this all together, and then hopefully we have a few minutes for some questions. But by tying this all together, I want to give you a very, very powerful technique that you can use starting tomorrow morning, that you can put to practice in your daily life that will entirely change the trajectory of your career. And it's harnessing the universal law of attraction in our brains to influence the world around us. How many of you believe in the universal law of attraction? Oh, a lot of you. Good. Well, I'm a scientist. I used to not believe in the universal law of attraction. I thought it was a whole bunch of spiritual mumbo jumbo until I stumbled on a law in physics one day. And yes, I read physics journals for sport. I'm a huge geek. But I was reading a physics journal one day and I read about a law in physics called constructive interference. And this says that if two frequencies of equal wavelength meet, the size of the frequency doubles. If two frequencies of equal wavelength meet, the size of the frequency doubles. This proves that you can get energy from conversation. We can get energy from other human beings. The opposite is true when opposite wavelengths meet, which is why people can steal energy from you. This is why guarding your energy is as important as filtering your water and guarding your food, because energy can be given to us or it can be stolen from us. And interestingly, they did a study called the Spain Scale of Emotion, SPANE. It stands for the Scale of Positive and Negative Emotion. And they measured frequency leaving a human being's body. And they determined that the most powerful frequency to leave a human being's body. Does anyone know? I can't hear what you're saying, but somebody repeat it into the microphone. I want to hear what people guess is the most powerful frequency to leave a human being's body. It is the frequency of authenticity. And if you want to look that study up, Spain Scale of Emotion, you're welcome to. The frequency of authenticity was 4 times the amplitude of love, meaning it had 4 times the capacity to influence the world around it. Only the interesting thing about this frequency of authenticity is that it only occurred when 2 things were present. Number 1, your words have to be truthful. And number 2, you have to believe what you're saying. If you don't believe what you're saying and your words are not truthful, you won't emanate the frequency of authenticity. Now, we call this intuition, right? Like sometimes you'll hear women are more intuitive. That's actually not true. Women are more sensitive to frequency, right? Because they're meant to bear children. They're very sensitive to frequency. This is why my wife tells me all the time, like, something's wrong with that dude. He's going to come stab us in the back. And I'm like, babe, he's great. Look at, he drives a nice car. He's got nice shoes. Suit fits perfectly. And then 6 months later, you're taking the knife out of your back. She picks up on that frequency that is leaving their body. And even though she can't put a finger on it, it is the lack of authenticity. So what if there was a way for us to put ourselves into an authentic state? And that's what I want to teach you. I'm going to end on this and then take some questions. I want you to learn a 60-second to 90-second technique to put yourself into an authentic state before your next meeting, before your next discussion with your spouse, before you have a sit down with your child, before, if you're a realtor, you go in and ask for a listing and you watch what happens to the influence that you have on the world around you, so long as your words are truthful and you believe what you're saying. And it works like this. First, I just do 5 deep breaths the way that I just did them with you. I just do 5 obnoxiously deep breaths to change my state. And then you spend 30 seconds setting your intention. And by intention, I mean, what is the intention of this meeting? What is my intention by, listening to this seminar? Like today, before I got on this call, my only intention was to add value, was to spend an hour just providing value, giving without the expectation of receipt. That's my intention for being here today. And then after you set your intention, which takes 30 seconds, you visualize the destination. This is super important. Most people, when they create images in their mind, they visualize the journey, That is very dangerous, because then when the journey doesn't go the way that your brain expects it to go, you create doubt. But if you visualize the destination, so for example, when I work with UFC fighters, or when I work with NFL athletes, or when I work with other professionals, I will not have them envision how the fight is going to go. I will have them envision themselves winning, their hand being held up at the end of that fight, the belt going around their waist, the crowd like excitement from their win. They visualize the destination. So if you're a realtor and you're walking in to ask for a listing, envision that client thanking you and putting their trust and confidence in you and giving you that listing. If you're having an intentional discussion with your child, visualize the outcome of that. Visualize the outcome of your meetings. So you do 5 deep breaths. You set your intention. What is my intention for this meeting? I want to be intentional about this meeting. What do I intend to get out of this? And then you visualize the end, the destination. And what will happen is you're tricking your brain into believing that this event has already occurred. And you will emanate the frequency of authenticity. And that frequency is so powerful. 70% of all of our communication between human beings is nonverbal. So if you emanate the frequency of authenticity, you will shift the state of that person, and you are much more likely to have the outcome that you want. So, I feel like I've just thrown a lot at you guys. Like I just ate everybody's face. So I hope you guys got something from that. But if there are any questions, I'd love to take a question. I can't hear you guys. So maybe if somebody has a microphone. There's Eric.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Fantastic. Everybody give it up for Gary Brecka. We will do a few questions. So Let me do one here with Leanne, and let me do one here on this side. Fancy glasses. Right here, second row.
Second row.
Right here. And then we'll do right in the middle. Okay, we'll do 3. We can go all day. And you might wonder, what does this have to do with leadership?
A lot. Yes.
An awful lot.
I really hope that you guys got something out of it.
Yeah. Believe me. This is your family, brother. Believe me. We're all related here. I will tell you, just with working with him, everybody I've ever sat down with him, he works with everybody in our family, essentially, my mom and dad, and brothers and sisters, kids, all of it, is they sit down, they have one conversation, and then they wish they would have recorded the conversation, because like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember everything that he just said. But because he is like the ultimate human when it comes to what he's got inside of his head, trying to figure all this stuff out. So and he works with, I won't shamelessly name drop, but he works with, the most famous was Dana White, probably. If you've seen the transformation that he did with Dana White, he told Dana he had 10 years and 4 months to live at age 52 if he didn't change some stuff. And he gave him an exact protocol. Dana followed it exactly, dropped, and what, just give the before and after in statistical information.
So Dana had something called metabolic syndrome, which, by the way, the #1 killer of human beings is cardiovascular disease. And the leading cause of cardiovascular disease is something called metabolic syndrome. And metabolic syndrome is showing up in younger and younger and younger ages right now. And it is any 2 of the following 5: abdominal obesity, high blood pressure, high sugars and insulin resistance, high triglycerides, and high blood glucose. He had 5 of those 5. When I met Dana White, he actually had more fat in his blood as a percentage than he had blood. His triglycerides were over 800. His blood pressure was through the roof. He was on 3 blood pressure medications, a beta blocker, a calcium channel blocker, and a diuretic. He was on a thyroid medication to keep his thyroid functioning. He was on a blood thinner, and he was on something for a tinnitus in his ears. He's on no medication now. Right? I went back 10 years in his medical records, and I said, Dana, what's amazing is all of your cardiovascular workup has always been normal. Has anyone ever checked your homocysteine? We checked his homocysteine, and over a 5-month period of time, as that homocysteine fell, the vascular system dilated, his pressure returned to normal. In fact, his cardiovascular surgeon, Dr. Ram Dandalaya, who's the head of cardiothoracic surgery at Cedars-Sinai, and I now work together all of the time. He hated me in the beginning. He said, you're putting Dana on these experimental vitamins. I don't believe a thing you're doing. I don't know what you do, but you're playing with people's lives. I'm going to repeat all of his cardiovascular tests. And so help me God, if they're not perfect, this will not be the last time you heard from me. And then he repeated those tests. They were all normalized. And to his credit, he now has, affiliated with our clinical team. And so, we can change the minds of physicians too, but he had abdominal obesity. He had insulin resistance. He had high blood pressure. He had high blood sugar. He had high triglycerides. And what was really difficult for Dana to understand was he had so much fat in his blood that I was going to put him on a high fat diet, what I call a keto reset, in order to lower the amount of fat in his blood. That was a hard concept for him to understand, that I wanted him to eat 75% fat in order to lower the fat in his blood. But all we did was we turned his body on that fat in his bloodstream like a fat gobbling Pac-Man. And every month over month, his triglycerides would fall by more than 100 points until they completely normalized. And so, if we tap into the power of what God gave us, God, the ability of this to heal this. There are fascinating experiments about frequency, taking two people and putting them in separate rooms. They have the exact same disease, not being truthful with one and telling them they got a placebo drug that has 100% cure rate. And they're very lucky for their specific type of ailment, and telling somebody else that this is the end of the line, and watching the difference between how their cells behave, right? This has such power over this. And so in Dana's case, we did it with methylated nutrients and amino acids.
How long did it take before he got off all his meds?
It took 5 months for him to get off everything.
How much weight did he lose in that period of time?
58 pounds.
58 pounds off all his meds, 5 months. And he's very specific on the protocols that he goes through. He's very evangelical about it.
And what's astounding to me, right, is the true pandemic that we have in this country is we have a pandemic of holding organs in the body responsible for crimes they don't commit, right? So he was on thyroid medication. And I looked at his thyroid diagnosis and I said, well, interestingly, if you suffer from hypothyroid, or somebody that suffers from hypothyroid, you may just want to take a note, because what happens is the thyroid produces two hormones, right? It produces something called T4 and something called T3. The majority of the time when T3 is low, we call this hypothyroid, and then we medicate the thyroid gland. But the little known fact about the thyroid is that it only produces 20% of the T3 in our blood. So if T3 is low, there's an 80% chance that it's not the thyroid. But we medicate the thyroid 100% of the time. And why is that? Well, the question becomes, where does the other 80% of this thyroid hormone come from? It is methylated from T4. We take T4 and convert it into T3. Outside of the thyroid, in the gut and the liver. If you don't have the right raw materials, selenium, thiamine, if you don't have the right raw materials to make this conversion, your T3 hormone is low, but not because there's something wrong with your thyroid, because your body is missing raw materials to convert the thyroid hormone outside of the thyroid. I can't even tell you how many thousands of clients have been like, oh my God, Gary, you fixed my thyroid. And I go, no, I didn't fix your thyroid. There was nothing wrong with your thyroid. We fixed your methylation outside of the thyroid. We just fixed the issue you had in the gut and the liver, and now you're converting your thyroid hormone because there was never anything wrong with that organ. Why would we stand on it with a chemical or a synthetic or a pharmaceutical when it's done nothing wrong? That's the real pandemic that we have going on right now in America.
Let me throw in the biggest statement that Gary helped me with is, doctors saying stress is a killer, stress is a killer, stress is a killer. So if you feel stressed, you should just chill, right? and Gary said, no. That's the worst thing you can do. If you feel stressed, to chill is the worst thing. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? I'm supposed to chill if I'm stressed out. I need to go lay down. I need to go stare at the wall or something. He said, no. He said, aging is the aggressive pursuit of comfort. You need to stress your body when you're stressed. You need to move. You need to challenge yourself. That's what's
That's right.
going to take care of the stress. And I was like, what? Nobody told me that. Well, I'm stressed out. I'm supposed to go to the gym. Yep. I'm stressed out. I'm supposed to get in cold water. Yep. Yeah. I'm like, okay, well, this is way different than my whole life plan. But Leanne, you got a question.
Thank you so much. This is awesome. I really appreciate it. I have a very weird question, but
Sure.
I'm super healthy. I work out 6 days a week. I'm vegan. I got COVID. And ever since then, I have horrible tinnitus in my left ear and a hearing loss. And I've met a bunch of other people who have the same thing. And I've been to all these doctors, and they've all told me I have to live with it for the rest of my life. And I'm supposed to go in next week and get a hearing aid and do all this stuff. And it's really interfering with my quality of life, but I've just been sucking it up for close to a year now. Is there anything that you could tell me that I could also pass on to other people I know regarding that, please?
Yeah, so there's no question that that's, fixable. Again, I just want to, for the sake of stating this, I'm not a physician. I'm not licensed to practice medicine, but I'll give you my opinion as a human biologist. So essentially what happens is when you have an elevated spike protein, either from the virus or from the vaccine, and yes, it can come from mRNA vaccines, right? We produce this spike protein, it leaves the cell, it enters the bloodstream, and it gets stuck in the arterial wall. You get something called diffuse vasculitis or dystonia vasculitis, which is an inflammatory condition in the lining of the blood vessel. A lot of us talk about how the skin is the largest organ in the body. I don't think that's true. The skin has the surface area of about half a tennis court. The lining of your blood vessels, 63,000 miles of blood vessels to be exact, has the surface area of 6 tennis courts. It is 12 times the surface area. So we know how bad a sunburn can affect us, but what about inflammation in 63,000 miles of blood vessel that has 12 times the surface area of the skin? So you imagine the impact on that. And then what happens in the ear in something called the tympanic membrane, which is a flexible drum, right? As you get build up at spike protein and reduced blood flow to that membrane, it stiffens. And when it stiffens, it hits these little bones in the ear, hammer, anvil, and stapes, and it tells the brain that there's a sound coming in, because we don't actually perceive sound as an electrical signal. We take a sound wave and convert it to an electrical signal. And when that conversion is interrupted, you get tinnitus. You get a constant sensation of a sound without the presence of the actual sound. So there is something called bromelain, thymulin, and nanokinase. You can get these in a supplement form. And what this will do, and additionally resveratrol, will restore the vascular laxity to that area of the body. It's a lack of blood flow that causes this tympanic membrane to stiffen and to send this signal, the sensation of a sound without the presence of a sound. So I would really consider doing that. And the second thing I might consider is talking to your doctor about using something called an exosome dripped into the ear to actually pull the inflammation right out of that tympanic membrane.
Thank you so much. I'll try anything right now. Thank
All right,
you.
fantastic. Let's go over here to my friend.
Yes, Teresa Vernetta Smith here.
Hi, Teresa.
I'm gonna try to get through this without crying. I have lost so many people that have taken interferon because of having multiple sclerosis. And the medication that they had to get cost over thousands of dollars. And a lot of them looked into things for their immune system, but because of the medication and the side effects, they deteriorated. And actually, I've lost a lot of them because of the fact I was an MS, counselor, and I helped them. So the interferon is what I have a question about, because I know the interferon is natural in the body, but when the immune system breaks down and the person thinks that they have to take a medication in order to, to help the immune system, we got to save lives.
Amen.
And I would like for you to help me to save the other lives that I haven't been able to touch.
So when we think about the etiology of multiple sclerosis, so for those of you that don't know what multiple sclerosis is, it is multiple sores, scleroses, in the lining of the nerve, in the sheath of the nerve. You can think about a nerve as a copper wire with a rubber sheath around it. If I make nicks in that rubber sheath, right, or I sand down that rubber sheath down to where I contact the copper wire, the signal will arc. Right? The signal will leave. So as it's traveling down that nerve, if there's a sclerosy, a sore, it will arc right there. And you get multiple scleroses or multiple sclerosis. And then what happens is eventually this neuronal disease progresses. But the question is, what is the cause of the demyelination? Right? Why do nerves spontaneously start to demyelinate? Well, they don't. There are some very, very well done, peer-reviewed, published clinical studies that found in the autopsies of multiple sclerosis patients, 100% of them had parasitic and viral infections. And we don't look at a parasite or a virus as actually causing the scleroses. By the way, we used to think that once a nerve had demyelinated that it could not remyelinate again. That is patently false. We remyelinate nerves through the process of methylation, and supplementing for methylation is an important part of addressing the healing from this condition. But absolutely, these people should do viral and pathogen testing and actually see if they have Epstein-Barr, cytomegalovirus, West Nile, or chronic Lyme infections, which sail right under the radar of a lot of diagnostics. And we just assume that there's this strange spontaneous erosion in the myelin sheath. And the truth is, that's not the issue. The issue is viral pathogens embedding themselves in locations where they don't belong, and then the immune system attacking them there. And then we say that we have an autoimmune disease, and we start to try to shut down the immune system. Same thing happens in Crohn's disease, right? We take people that have Crohn's disease and we say that's an autoimmune disorder. Well, that's actually not true, because what is the immune system doing? The immune system is attacking bacteria that should have stayed inside the luminal wall of the gut, but they're exiting the luminal wall of the gut and they're in a location where they don't belong. And just like a bouncer trying to keep a guy out of a bar, he says, hey, if you come in here, I'm going to throw you out. There's going to be a fight. So when bacteria shows up in the luminal wall of the intestine or escapes the intestine through leaky gut and enters the bloodstream, the immune system properly attacks them and says, you're not supposed to be here. And then we say the immune system's misbehaving. We're going to punish the immune system with methotrexate, with anti-inflammatories. We're going to use immunosuppressants to stop it from doing its job instead of sealing the gut. So, we had a patient, and I'm not saying that all Parkinson's patients have viral pathogens, but an interesting case that my clinical team encountered, and we've had several of these, a patient that was diagnosed with Parkinson's 6 years ago. And when we looked at blood work, we saw every year since he had been diagnosed, we saw an elevated white blood cell called an immature granulocyte. And it's not elevated in Parkinson's. It's elevated in chronic viral attacks. And so my clinic director said, hey, the next time that you come down to see us, we want to do a viral pathogen test on you. And we tested him for viruses, and we found out that he had the highest level of West Nile, which he got from a Zika mosquito right here in Miami. And he had one of the highest Lyme titers that we'd ever seen. So he actually didn't have Parkinson's. He had the neurological symptoms of Parkinson's because he had a viral pathogen. So very often when we look at the spokes of the wheel, what's going wrong in the human body, it looks like the whole world's going to hell in a handbasket. I've got weight gain, water retention, poor sleep, poor focus and concentration. I got an autoimmune disease. I got thyroid. I got high blood pressure. But we have to start asking ourselves, where do all of these things meet? What is the common hub where all of these things meet? And the majority of the time, it is nutrient deficiencies. You give the body the raw material it needs to do its job, and it performs incredibly. And so, I would really encourage you to start looking into the research between viruses and the onset of multiple sclerosis and parasites and the onset of multiple sclerosis, because you'll find that to this day, they say the etiology, the genesis of these diseases is unknown. I don't believe that anything is idiopathic in human beings. I just believe that we don't know the source, and we should continue to look for the source. And so I would encourage these people to do virus and parasite testing, and then start to get on a good viral anti-parasitic protocol. Same thing is true with mold and other issues. People get chronic mold infections. They don't ever realize that they have a fungus or a mold growing inside their body. They get this strange myriad of symptoms. And when you cleanse the body from these pathogens, it goes back to functioning like the beautiful machine it was designed to.
All right. One more question. We have our last question. We could go all day. Everybody in here would have a question. Here's what I would just tell you all. You have 72 hours to find the replay of this. You can watch this again. You also can go watch him on Joe Rogan. You can watch him. Just look up his podcast, the Ultimate Human. His podcast there. You can find lots of his stuff. And you know, this wasn't designed to sell you anything, even though I see some people going, this guy would be a great speaker at our company convention. This would be amazing. But this wasn't designed as any form of anything other than to just bring you value. He's brought my family value. He's brought me and Maureen and myself value. And I wanted to bring you value so you could become the best form of yourself, to be able to be the best leader you could possibly be. But go ahead, last question.
Thank you so much. You completely blew my mind. I'm Daniela from Chile, and I wanted to ask you about your thoughts on kids and respiratory issues. So we've got a 6-year-old and we've taken her so many people. We've done all the elimination diets, you know, to see if she's got any allergies or things like that. And what they say is just no big deal. Just take her adenoids out. She's constantly inflamed, and it just feels so unnatural to us. But the doctors, they just say, we take them out every day, all the time. Like, it's just the most normal thing, like no big deal. And so we are stuck still with the problem. We've tried so much, and we feel that that's the same response we get all the time, right? And then all the judging of the family going, you just don't care about your child because you're not taking her adenoids out. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, first of all, my whole position on that, thyroidectomies, you know, all of these other surgeries that we do to just get rid of organs, to me anyway, is very nonsensical. If it wasn't necessary, it wouldn't be there. You know, my sincere belief is that this body was created by God. You're never going to convince me that two bacteria banged each other in a mud puddle and 400 million years later we had human beings. The more I understand about physiology, human physiology, the more deep I actually believe that this was made by a creator. So we didn't put things in here that are unnecessary. So why would we take them out unnecessarily? So, you know, generally what happens in these kinds of conditions, adenoid, histamine reactions in the adenoids, allergies, food sensitivities. And by the way, I think food sensitivity testing is very 1998 science, right? Because one of the things that we never do is we never consider somebody's baseline state of inflammation. So let me give you an example. When we do allergy testing, for example, we take your blood and we wash it down a membrane. And then on the other side of the membrane, we wash an allergen, wheat, soy, dairy, corn, blueberries, whatever it is, gluten, we wash it down a membrane. And we measure how upset the immune system and how upset the blood gets by the inflammatory reaction across this membrane. And then we grade it from a 1 to a 10. 1 to 3 is mild, 3 to 6 is moderate, 6 to 10 is severe. Okay. And then we say you're severely allergic to eggs, wheat, soy, dairy, corn. You're mildly allergic to blueberries and pine nuts. But the truth is, this testing, and what I think they're probably not considering in your son's case, is what is the baseline state of inflammation? In other words, are you walking around at a 6? So that if something causes a sensitivity of a 2, it shows up as an 8. It's just like if I took two people and stood them right next to each other and I said, okay, I'm going to push in on your back with a pressure of 2. You tell me how much pain you feel. And I push in on your back and you go, I barely felt that. And then I take, you know, your spouse and I do the same amount of pressure and they record a pain level of 10 because they had a pinched nerve and they started at an 8. Same pressure. One records a pain of 10, one records a pain of 2. This is very similar to how histamines work in the human body. When you have high levels of histamine, and I would really suggest that you get his homocysteine checked, his homocysteine level. If you have high levels of histamines, then small insults, pollen, wheat, wheatgrass, air pollution, small insults cause the already elevated histamine response to elevate even more and become symptomatic. Whereas somebody else that's walking around at a 0 gets an insult of a 2 and it's non-symptomatic. He's walking around at a 6 gets an insult of 2, and he's symptomatic. So the idea is not to take the organ out that's responding. The idea is to lower the histamine response. These are called mast cell symptoms, and they're also called histamine, hypersensitivity to histamines. And if you find the source, and I suspect it's hyperhomocystinemia, and you lower the level of baseline inflammation, you see things like asthma and allergies and food sensitivities permanently take a back seat, because you never really had those allergies or food sensitivities or sensitivities or allergic reactions. You were having a minor reaction and an elevated histamine response. I hope that.
Gary, my friend.
Thank you, guys.
I love you, brother. Everybody give Gary Breck a big round of applause. Thanks for